Welcome to Talking Tea with Auntie, where we interview everyday people on interesting topics. And today's topic is being a nurse in Canada with today's guest, Katie. And now to me, your gay auntie. Hello lovers, welcome to another episode of Talk and Tea with Auntie. I'm so excited all of y'all here for such a fantastic episode. If you followed me here from TikTok, welcome as always. And if you found me organically, I'm so happy you found me, my love. Feel free to give a subscribe and turn on that notification bell and give it a like and comment what other type of episode or topic you'd like me to cover in the comments section. Now, I'm excited for this episode because we're going to be talking to somebody who's a nurse, but not only in the United States. This is a nurse out of Canada. We've already had an episode or two of nurses here based in the United States, so I think it's a fantastic opportunity to explore what nursing's like in another country and our northern neighbor, because I'm here in Texas. I'm excited to have this talk, and it's going to be a wonderful guest. And if you enjoy this content and want to support your gay auntie, feel free to become a patron on my Patreon for as low as $3 a month at patreon.com/Shining Nathan. And one of the benefits of that is you get to ask my guests questions in our patron-only segment. Well, patron questions segment. So let's get on and bring on Katie. So welcome, Katie. Tell me about you. You're based in Canada, correct?
I am. I am in Toronto. Well, I am in Ontario, about an hour north of Toronto, the major city. It's actually a quite rural area. It's called Jackson's Point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And are you originally from Canada, or did you immigrate from the United States? Tell me about yourself.
No, I was born and raised in Toronto.
Beautiful. I've never been to Toronto, but I've heard so many good things.
Yeah, it's an interesting city. Very similar to Chicago. Like a sister city to Chicago.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what really took you into nursing? What was your journey like from kid to you now?
Well, I after high school, I actually got a degree in theater arts and tried to make it as an actress in Toronto. And it was just a little bit soul crushing, you know, like going to these auditions, million girls that look just like me. Rent is very expensive in the city, and it was getting hard, you know, being a bartender, wannabe actress type thing. My aunt was a nurse and told me all her stories, and I thought that I would, you know, go to school and try it. So that was about 10 years ago. So I've been a nurse for about 10 years now.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. And so what has been the transition being like from being a theater artist to now being a nurse in the medical profession?
I think the transition has been that I remain fascinated by people, and I'm still very inspired by people. I meet patients sometimes where I'm like, you know what, there could be a whole player movie about you and your personality, you know? So many different characters. People have so many different perceptions about themselves and their own health, and I remain fascinated by people, so it's been a good transition that way.
I love that. Is one of the biggest things about being in theater. I was a theater arts major in costume design, fell into as a marketing director for 15 years, and now here I am. And so it's very interesting using that dynamic of watching people. Where is a character that you have met in your nursing journey that has just stood out throughout all of it?
When I was working in palliative care, which is where I started, we had a lady who had esophageal cancer, so cancer of the esophagus, but she also had quite a personality and a social history, but she eventually needed a tracheostomy, so she had the hole here for breathing. And she would go outside to smoke through it, but she would wear at night this nightgown with her trach and talk about her life and talk about different men. And she would just talk about how, you know, you don't always need a man. They're, you know, optional. But I never saw her smoke because she would go outside, but I just always pictured her in her nightgown smoking out of her trach. And I was like, there's somebody you could absolutely make a movie about, you know?
Oh my God, yeah. She sounds kind of like one of those old silent film actresses that did not translate to the main screen.
Exactly. I'm like, that's a missed opportunity. Somebody missed out on meeting her. They could have really ran with it rather.
I love it. And so in this transformation, do you still use any of your acting or your theater ability in nursing? If so, how?
Oh, absolutely. People sometimes ask questions or do things that are pretty outrageous or, off the cuff. So it helps with a poker face. And it also helps when you're like totally overwhelmed and maybe don't have the energy to really be as present as you want to be, but you can at least, take a deep breath and make the eye contact and at least make the person feel like you're listening to them, even when you maybe don't have it in you, because, making people feel badly in vulnerable times isn't really an option. So the acting really does work well, serves me well there.
I can fully understand and I can totally see it. My mother's one of those people. She's 71 and I'm like, I told one of the nurses, she's very active. And I said, you can just say she's being a cunt. You can just say it. I know my mother. Like, she is, and I know.
She says being active.
She's like she's being very energetic and very opinionated. I'm like, you can just say she's being a cunt. You can just
such a positive spin.
Oh my God! So in this whole beautiful journey of being a bartender. And then you were being a bartender while trying to be an actress.
Yeah.
Did you continue that in nursing school? And how was nursing school for you? So just to dial this back a little bit.
I was a bartender all through nursing school. Nursing school is one of the most stressful. It was one of the most stressful times in my life. It's a women-based profession. I find people who choose to teach nursing, at least back then, it's a very specific type of person, all A-type personalities, and all of the people in all the nursing students are so hopeful. They want this so bad, and some days it really felt like they were purposely trying to make it difficult and to make you grapple with your decision. And the testing, the questions are always, what is the most correct response? So it becomes very stressful when you haven't been a nurse yet and everything is just theoretical, trying to decide, all of the answers are right, but what's the most right? And a lot of the time, I've learned now that I've been a nurse for 10 years that what is the most correct is subjective based on what is happening to the patient. So it was very stressful. I've always said it's like nursing school needs to be reformed in a lot of ways. It should be more practical based, and they should make it not easier, of course, but I found a lot of what I was taught really didn't have any bearing on my ability to be a good nurse. It was more my ability to retain and then regurgitate information, which is so not what nursing is about.
When I interviewed one American nurse, it was kind of very similar in terms of what you're saying now. Exactly. In terms of what is the most right and the regurgitation of information. And so did you do clinicals? I think that was something somebody said after nursing school. How long did all of that take you?
So a long time. It's a four-year program, but I did it two ways. I was a RPN. I think it's an LPN in America. You also have nursing aides, so the rules are a little bit different. But I first did a 3-year diploma program and then later went and got my degree. So I've done lots of clinicals. The first one in Canada, they usually start you in like a long-term care, like a senior's residence. And then I did a very busy medical surgical floor, and then one in the community, and then another one in complex care, which are people with complex health needs. So people that are wheelchair bound or fed through feeding tubes. that kind of thing. Second time around, I got to do clinical in emergency room, which is where I work now. So,
Oh, and
yeah.
how do you like working in an emergency room?
I absolutely love the chaos that an emergency room brings. I like the pace. I like the different people I work with. Like, again, talking about A-type personalities, like there's a whole lot of personality, nurse-wise and doctor-wise, in the emergency room. So there's never a dull moment. It's been so far my favorite type of nursing to date.
Oh, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. And so, in terms of all this chaos going on, what does a nurse, an ER nurse, do to kind of relax and unwind? What are the hobbies a ER nurse has?
It's a lot of reality television, if I'm being honest. Like, there's no better way to shut off my brain. I'm also really into plants, love growing plants from seeds, and then like tropical house plants and bird watching. It's like one of my favorite things to do after night shift. If I can't sleep, at around 8:30 in the morning, the birds are absolutely at the feeder. So it's a great way to unwind for me.
Bird watching.
Yeah.
Tell me, what's your favorite bird?
In this area of the world, I would say the cardinal, because it's just the most colorful we've got in these. This isn't a tropical area.
It's not.
In terms of colorful birds, like cardinals are it.
They really, I've seen occasional blue jays, but blue jays do not have the same vibrancy as cardinals do. So,
no, and they're actually kind of a mean bird. They're a part of the crow family, and if you're watching them, how they interact together, you can tell that the blue jay's a little bit of the villain, to be honest.
Am I the villain? I can't be the villain.
The blue jay's the villain.
So do you go out into the wilderness and actually do bird watching with like binoculars and the whole spiel?
I don't do binoculars, but I do, we have lots of like forested walking trails. So I bring a bag of seed, and if I stand out there long enough with the seed in my hand, the chickadees will eventually come.
Oh, so that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Great time.
What does a shift typically look like for you on a regular basis for you?
So they're 12-hour shifts. So day shift, get there at 7:30 in the morning, take report, and it is very much a blur. It is a series of assessing people, taking blood work, sending them to X-ray, explaining things, transferring them to diagnostic imaging, calling doctors, consulting with other nurses. It is just chaos, like a somewhat organized chaos. 12 hours have never gone by so fast.
I guess it's kind of like theater in a way as well.
Yes.
Organized chaos.
Yep, that's just it. Another parallel.
A bunch of type A's creating organized chaos.
Yes. Yeah.
So 12-hour shifts. And in this, I'm not sure if you've been exposed to the American medical establishment, but do you know any the differences, or if you have been able to interact with other medical professionals that are here in the States? And is there any differences that you can tell?
Nurses, generally speaking, make more money in the United States. And the other difference, I guess, would be the whole insurance aspect. So in Canada, we have socialized medicine or healthcare. So people come in and there's no out-of-pocket expense to the patient. Whether which one's better is difficult to say, and it depends so much on how well our socialized system is being funded. So that's when things start to take. In recent years in Canada, it has not been well funded, and there is now a push for privatized healthcare in Canada because, unfortunately, many patients don't feel like they're getting what they need out of the socialized system. So that's the biggest difference. But in my opinion, I think a socialized system works better. Nobody ever has to worry about finances when it comes to potentially life-saving medical care. But I think it's another one of those things where corporate interests or private interests want to make a dollar off of people, it gets problematic, but then it gets even more problematic when people are relying on the socialized system and it's not giving the people what they need either.
Mm-hmm. And that can go through proper funding from the government in terms of, because here in the United States, I know it is such a complex intricacy of insurance. So I could go to a hospital that's within network, but my anesthesiologist is a subcontractor that is not in my network. And so I will be charged for the anesthesiologist, and the surgeon or one of the nurses may not be in my network because they are subcontracted out. So then I would still wind up paying like $2,000 to $3,000 because I have to, those 2-3 people were not in network, even though the hospital I got the procedure. And so there's one of the nurse that I spoke to the other day, who's an American nurse, did say that taking out the profit aspect is a much better idea because of all the issues that it's so complex. It's so complex and weird.
Yes. But it makes it even more, not just complex, but problematic when there is someone somewhere profiting off of like the medical problems of a human, right? Mm-hmm. So I agree with her that taking away this aspect of profit to illness.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's the world we're living in right now. I feel like
everything's trying to shift to a way that we're like, wait, what is happening? What is happening?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's lots of differences, but I think the way the health care is delivered is largely the same. So I think a nursing job in Canada would be very similar to the work a nurse would do in the States.
Beautiful. And have you been able to interact with any nurses out of the States at all? Or
because lots of nurses here do go to work in the States, mostly Texas and Los Angeles. I think they're warm places. A lot of people here get absolutely sick and tired of the winter. I don't blame them. And that's a place that is known for some reason for hiring Canadian nurses.
Okay, I did not know that. And I'm here in Texas and I'm tired of the heat.
Oh, really?
It gets to about 110 degrees in the summer, and that'll last for most of like a good 7 months of the year.
Right, and that's 110 Fahrenheit, which I think is like 40 something degrees
Celsius, I think. Yeah.
Believe it or not, it does get that hot here in the summer. Certain days during heat waves, it's just a very humid. The air is dense. It's like thick. You gotta swim through it.
Sounds like Houston.
Yeah, it's not fun. If it was like that for weeks on end, I'd be sick of it too.
Oh yeah, no, it's. I think this last summer, because I like biking and I'm built for the heat. I'm Hispanic. I don't burn or anything. But last summer, I went to go bike and I was like, the sun hurts. The sun hurts. Like, I can be out at 108 degree, 40 Fahrenheit Celsius and be fine. But last summer I was like, no, this hurts. This hurts bad. I'm going inside.
Yeah. On the flip side, we had some icy weather this past season where it's like minus 25 and the wind hurts. It like it quite literally burns your skin, the cold.
Oh my God.
It's like freeze drying. You can feel the moisture leave your eyes when you go outside. It's bad.
Oh my God. And here we get this winter, I think we were fortunate because we had several weeks where the temperature stayed within a range. And that's rare because usually like this week, for instance, one day it was like 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Then the next day it was 30. There was 0 Celsius. And then it would just, every day was a different degree. And now it's kind of like, okay, we're going to be hot again. And I'm like, the trees don't know that it is not. So they're just like, oh, we're going to pollinate. And so one pollen everywhere. And so your sinuses and allergies are like, we're done. You know, we're done.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
It is. How are allergies there in Canada for y'all?
We have an allergy season. So it is usually, I guess, late spring, and it's mostly ragweed for people. It's this like weed we have, and some people are crazy allergic to it, and they have like the swollen eyes and the runny nose. But luckily in terms of environmental allergies, we really only have one bad season. The rest would be for people who are allergic to dust and stuff. And then the winter is worse for them because they're stuck inside because no one's going outside.
No. Here we have all the allergies.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's wonderful. And so you've been in nursing 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What is an incident that has, on the good side, what is an incident that really brought you joy and made you love what you do most? Because everybody has those one or two incidents. It's just like, yeah.
Yeah. I'm lucky because some nurses that start now find it so stressful that they have difficulty, I think, loving it at the beginning. But I'm lucky. I started in palliative care, and I started in this nursing that had a bit of a slower pace, where I could really get a good hold of the soft skills of nursing.
And what is palliative care? I'm sorry.
Palliative care is end-of-life care. So it is pain and symptom management for people who are at the end of their life. So it was a really good place to start to learn how to speak to people in a therapeutic way, and the whole bedside manner, and the very simple tasks like helping people get dressed and helping them get changed and that kind of thing. And being able to comfort people and really feel like I was nursing people so early in my career, and also providing just kind words to their family, was that moment in my career really did make me become a nurse. I really feel like even the nurses that work there, the ones that had more experience, really were so nurturing to me, and it's truly where I became a nurse and really connected with people and nursing. So it was my experience doing that job. So it was such a strange transition. I went from, gently kind of aiding people into a comfortable death, to the flip side of absolutely needing to keep them alive in the emergency room. But I think I learned, when you learn how people pass and what shuts down in their bodies, it was a good transition to slowly learn what they need to keep them alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think usually it's vision, then they stop eating, stop drinking, vision, and then hearing's last, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then when people are very sick, they become very anxious before, like that. When somebody says, they say in nursing, like, I feel like I have this sense of doom, it's a warning sign for the nurse, like, this person is sick. Oh yes. And it has been true 100% of the time.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is. And how do you deal being, I know, because you save a lot of lives, but I'm sure there are some that unfortunately you couldn't. How do you deal with that loss for yourself? Because I'm sure you do empathize.
In the emergency room, we do have debriefings after anytime we have to give CPR or any sort of death. We do have debriefings. I find if you're feeling like you need to cry, I think you need to go and cry. You need to remove yourself and cry. I think the key is to not keep the feeling inside. The best way you can really handle it is to allow yourself to feel it. Suppressing any of those, I think, just causes stress and could probably make you pretty resentful of the job. Nurses talk about seeing all those things and having to immediately go back to work. I think that's harmful. I think we need to have the space to be able to cry, grieve, acknowledge that it was sad and that we've witnessed, one of the worst days of not just the patient, but their families' lives, and have that moment for them so we can move on and be a good nurse to the next patient, because it would be hard to actively listen to the next patient when you're not actively listening to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think that's a very good way of coping with that type of situation. And how do you, this is be on the flip side, how do you deal with all the immense joy? Because even joy of somebody's life being saved can be overwhelming too on the other side.
Mm-hmm. A lot of adrenaline with that comes with that. So I don't know. I think it's one of the satisfying parts of my job that doesn't need a whole lot of reflection, because that's the goal. You know, you've saved the life, and then you're like, on to the next. Does anybody else need saving? I did that. Who's next? It really, those very emerge shifts, like emergency room shifts, are very energizing, and it can be actually difficult, yes, to sleep. Luckily, I have a 45-minute drive from work, so music, sometimes phone a friend, a podcast, something where I can listen and unwind is the best thing to do for me.
Honestly, I get you there too. And what podcasts do you get to unwind? Let's get a little bit into that.
I've been listening to, we have like a national broadcast service, the CBC. So I listen to their podcasts on different Canadian current events. There's also a medical one called White Coat Black Magic, where doctors talk about different stories, different interesting patient stories. Yeah, and then sometimes I just like listening to people talk, any sort of talk interview. The lady who wrote Wild, Cheryl Strayed, had a podcast where people would, like, it was called Dear Sugar, an advice column, and people would call in looking for advice, and they would mull that over. And that's a good way to unwind too, is listening to other people's problems.
A little bit of, I think it's called Schadenfreude, is it not?
yes, very that.
That is, I do listen to several podcasts, and I fully agree with you in that. And I need to check out White Coat Black Magic. Let me write that down for myself. Writing it down.
Yeah.
Oh, good. And so what are some things about the nursing profession, or just being a nurse, that everyday people may not know or understand or guess? A little insight behind the curtain type of thing.
That as much as it is a profession where we are caring and somewhat like serving people, that doesn't mean that we want to do things for you that you can do for yourself. I find sometimes I once had a 35-year-old man ask me to pull the blanket up over his feet, and I was like, you can do that yourself. So this expectation that nurses just want to do everything for you, I think is a myth. That we want to do the things for you that we have to do for you to help you, but we don't want you to become helpless because we're in the room. You know?
And do you think part of that mentality is from that like 1940s, 50s view of nursing?
Absolutely, because I would say that some patients come in with, not life or death things. They're sick, but they're going to be all right, and they do very much behave like a sick Victorian child. I am now completely helpless and pale, and I can't do anything for myself. And you're like, that won't help you. You're not going to get any better.
And so how is it, do you navigate or address that? You say, no, you can do that? Or are you completely blunt? Or do you put the,
No, I do the whole we're going to nurse you back to health by helping you do things for yourself. You're going to help yourself, right? I'm going to teach you how to help yourself here. We're going to nurse you back to health together. We're doing it together. Yeah.
And I can see that because my mom, I love my mom, and she's 71, and there are things she can't do. However, like I said, she could be an absolute see you next Tuesday, especially because she does not like being in the hospital, even though I'm like, you're only going to be here for 2 days, Mom. And she manipulates me to go to the hospital at like 6 a.m. I'm not a morning person. And she knows how to manipulate me, but she'll be like, I'm so feeble. I'm like, you are fine. You're just here for a heart cath, mother.
Yeah, I think that mentality though, I've got to say, like when I was, especially during the pandemic when it was super busy and crazy, I do remember being like, when it would be really icy outside, if I were to slip and break my ankle, then maybe somebody could take care of me, because I'm a little bit burnt out. So I do understand the mentality. I get it. I can't say that it's foreign to me, because I absolutely do understand it.
It's such a, because like for me, when I'm in the hospital, I'm like, I'm getting the best sleep I'm ever getting. Like
Yeah.
a few times, I'm like, you know, just I'll whatever, and I'm asleep. Like, don't wait. I get annoyed because they take my vitals every like however hours. So I'm like, can you not wake me up when you do it? Like, you don't have to wake me up.
Right.
I'm a rag doll. I'm on morphine. Just do the thing. Like, don't wake me up. I'm alive.
Yeah. Am I breathing?
I'm breathing and I'm alive. You can do all the vitals without me being awake during it.
Right. Yeah.
And so, talking about the pandemic, how was that? That was I think technically we are still technically in it, but in the heat of it, how was that from beginning to where we finally started, getting the vaccine out and things like that?
Yeah. Just really wild. And Ontario had, like, the province I'm in had a very big wave. It was interesting because at the time I worked in surgery, like elective surgeries, like hip replacements, and they stopped doing those things. So at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was redeployed to a group home for adults who had conditions like cerebral palsy and that kind of thing. And they were experiencing an outbreak, not just of the patients, but of all of the people that care for these people every day. So I was in this situation, going into a new situation, scared of the virus because we didn't know anything, and in a new environment. And I had to start a relationship with these people who have their own caregivers, and getting them to trust me and me getting to know them when they were in some of one of the most vulnerable times of their life was an eye-opening experience. I'm privileged to have been a part of it. Eventually their staff all recovered, but they lost some of the residents, and it was really sad. And then people started being COVID deniers while I was experiencing all of that. So it definitely changed my worldview. And there were disappointing times, people that were saying things. In the beginning, it was very like, stay home, let's take care of each other. And I was like, wow, this is really amazing to rise to the occasion. And I felt like I had a community behind me, right? And then there were moments where that changed, with the politics. Masks started becoming a political thing, and that was something I was not prepared for, right? I was like, what? We're politicizing masks? Like, I was really shocked. And then politicizing the vaccine, right? So, and then all of the things that came along with it. So it was just the best of times, and then became literally the worst of times, and then really isolating, because there was a period of time where I felt like I was absolutely carrying the plague. So I was isolating myself from everybody. And, people were asking me, what's it like at work? And I was like, not really able to explain it because it was surreal. It feels like a blur. It was like from going to that area, the group home, back into the hospital, where all of the sudden people were on ventilators, and it was just the whole way the hospital looked. It changed everything. Changed everything.
I still look back at the time. I'm like, what happened? And were the politics as divisive there in Canada as they were here in the United States? Because here in the United States, it was a whole kerfuffle. I was really shocked, like you were, when people were like, masks. I'm like, it's a piece of cloth, and they're cute. Like, I can mask to match every outfit.
And it's just the whole thing with masks for me was, say 20 years down the line, we find out they weren't helpful. Like, I still was comfortable wearing it and I would have defended it, because that's what I thought. I was just doing what I thought was helpful for me and my community. I thought it was as simple as that, but no, our politics are as divisive. Canada really tends to follow what the states are doing on a more micro level. So we had anti-masks protests. If you look it up, we had one that absolutely shut down the capital of the country. People who were anti-vaccine and mask mandates, and they occupied the entire capital city for a good month, I think.
I didn't know that. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was a really strange time and a bit of an identity crisis for Canada, because a country that I think people view as being very polite, and it's just really not the case. And what's interesting about it is these protesters used the Canadian flag. It became the flag. People would fly it on their trucks or cars, kind of as a symbol of being anti-vaccine mandate or and you're like, now my flag, now the country's flag means something different. So the whole thing changed the political landscape of Canada, and kind of changed even my own view of. I was a little taken aback. I knew there'd be some pushback, but not the amount there was. And yeah, it's crazy times. I'm glad we're somewhat on the other end of that, but you know, there is this feeling that things will never really ever be the same again.
Yeah,
you know?
I fully agree, and it still doesn't feel the same. And am I mad at it? Not necessarily. I mean, I now wear masks during allergy season, and it has significantly improved because I mean, this nose is big. And so I'll wear a mask when I know pollen count is high. And I've had one issue when I did not pay attention to the pollen count. But I was like, I have not had real issues since this pandemic happened, because I now know allergy season. We're going to keep wearing this mask during allergies.
Yes, because it does help, right?
It'll be covered in yellow, but my nose ain't.
Yeah.
And that is so interesting, because I did not know anything about the true politicization in Canada. Even though y'all are our neighbor, I mean, I'm probably the furthest away from Canada you can kind of get in the United States. And it kind of seems like our politics kind of seeped in to y'all as well, because it was huge here, and I was just like, comfy in my own little house. It's like, y'all really don't have hobbies to keep you occupied for a few months? I start coming up with tons of new ones.
Yeah. And I think it's just that whole take on like individualism with I don't want to wear them. This has affected me, because people tend to we don't think of ourselves as a community, because we've gotten so far away from that, right? Yeah. Of really needing each other. I think we still need each other, but in terms of like, you know, you could work a job, never see a human, pay your rent, live in your apartment alone. You really don't need other people in your day-to-day life. But when, you know, times get rough or it hits the fan, I think what will help us survive is our ability to see each other as extensions of ourselves, as a community. Like we really do need each other.
And the pandemic that is a paramount human evolution, is the fact that we can build community, and we're tailored to have community. And so we automatically, that's what's, I think personally, and actually no, it's scientifically proven, historically proven, that's how we've succeeded as a species, is being able to be, because we're not the fastest, we're not the strongest. Yeah, we are the smartest, but that doesn't count for much if you're a weak little non-armored primate by yourself.
Yeah. And we're not perfect, right? We break our legs. And what's interesting is that one of the first signs, apparently, of a civilization is the fossils of what looked like a healed femur. So somebody had broken their femur and it had been healed, and obviously that person had been taken care of, otherwise they wouldn't have survived. So that always really is one of those facts that kind of touches my heart. And yeah, that we care for each other. That's what truly makes us humans in a community.
I fully agree. And I think most people, once you get rid of all the politics, genuinely do care for each other. It's just you add all that ness over it. I
Hmm.
try to see the good. Yes, there's bad, and everybody can have bad. I can be a total asshole. I fully understand that. I'm very hyper aware, but I think most people care. It's just when you add that layer, it's when problems come up.
Yes, yes, because I think most people, if they said unkind words to another human being and saw the hurt look on the human being's face, it's human nature to be like, ooh, I hurt them. That doesn't make me feel good. I don't think that makes any of us feel good. But when you bring along the internet that is faceless in a lot of different ways, and these opinions that become hive minds, right? People are like, well, all of these people think that way too. So right? We get in these
Yeah.
clumps of thinking and forget that there's, other people that you're maybe hurting with these types of thoughts or speak, like this type of speech,
Yeah,
you know?
I fully agree. I fully agree.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to take a moment. We'll use the rest of this time. I do a segment called Patron Questions, and my patrons on Patreon get a benefit to ask my guests questions. And we have a few questions here that I'm
Okay.
excited to share with you. And at any time, if you don't feel comfortable answering it or you don't have an answer, you can always decline, and that is perfectly
Okay.
fine, as with any question. So you are not beheld to answer these questions at all. So let's get into it. And for people that are going
Okay.
to be watching and listening, if you want to ask a question of our next guests, feel free to become a patron on Patreon for as low as $3 a month at patreon.com/Shining Nathan. So now let's get into the important part. Okay,
Okay.
Shira Levi asks, can you tell us any stories about the nicest and or meanest interaction you've had due to your job?
Ah, the nicest interaction, one of the nicest, was I had an older lady in palliative care that I took care of for about 2 weeks before she passed. And after she had passed, her family had brought me a card with a gift card inside because she had let them know that she wanted me to go and buy myself a little something because I had mentioned to her that I was buying a new home that I was decorating. So I have something in my house that I bought with the gift card, and it's every time I look at it, I'm really touched and reminded that my job is important and that it has impact, especially on days where I feel like people are terrible. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. And no meanest interactions.
More recently,
Oh gosh.
a girl was actively bleeding, and all of the nurses, she had passed out, and all of the nurses were, trying to get her onto a stretcher, and it was all this chaos. And then a family member popped out of the room and was like, "Excuse me, we've been asking for a warm blanket for 30 minutes now." And I was like, "Ma'am, we're busy."
This isn't a hotel.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my gosh. People do be like that. They really do.
A little insular. They get sick, they get in a hospital, and they get a little bit like, "I'm the only person here, right?" And you're like, "No,
No,
you're not."
you're one of
They just
50.
need reminders.
Always remember, be kind to your nurses. They have other people too. So Shea B, Shay or Shea, I always forget which pronunciation. Shea B or Shay B asks, if you could change one thing about standard nursing practices today based on your personal experiences, what would it be and why?
That's a hard one. Standard nursing practices. I think we changed the way we look at the pain scale. This whole 0 to 10, it's so subjective, and I don't know if the pain scale has been effective in managing people with chronic pain who have a certain pain tolerance. And I think the whole way we assess and manage pain is something I would change, because when I listen to patients on different social media, especially TikTok, lots of patients feel as though they're not believed, feel like it's not managed appropriately. There's lots of different factors that come into play. Pain is such a complex thing. It's based on your previous experiences with pain and so many different factors that's something that I would change, because it looks like there's a big gap there. There's a lot of people who are still feeling like they're not getting what they need. So that would be what I would change.
I love that. Honestly, yeah. I can see that because I have a higher pain tolerance than other people do just based on my own chronic pain. And then I get tattoos. So it's like when I'm like, this tattoo's gonna hurt so bad, and then I'm asleep during it.
Strange, right?
Yeah.
Pain is a weird thing.
It really is. And then other friends, they could not. So moving on, it's ClinSnip01, and if you're watching this, babe, you can correct me on the pronunciation. How do you manage your mental health? What methods do you use to not bring burdens of work home with you? And I think you touched on that on your 45-minute drive a little bit.
Yes. So there is a term called sliming that apparently is when a nurse or a doctor goes home and dumps the stresses of the day onto their spouse or children. So my fiance gives me some time at the end of the shift to tell him about anything that I really need to get off my chest. And then we eat dinner and we move on and talk about each other's days, not in the context of work. And also that drive home where I, have 45 minutes alone in my car. I don't have to be on the phone, right? So I have 45 minutes to, sometimes I have conversations. I respond in the way that I wish I had responded, or I say what I wish I had said differently, and I get it off my chest, and it does really help. Or just loud music, loud screamy music. Sometimes it's more relaxing classical music. But yeah, those are some of the things I do. Got to be mindful that not every, although it's a big day for me and there's a lot that happened and I would love to talk about it because it's my job and it's all just so exciting sometimes that not everybody, my fiance maybe doesn't want to hear about it for hours on end, Yeah,
100%. And we have similar coping mechanisms where I'll have full fights with somebody I had an altercation with a day ago, and I'm doing it today. What I wanted to say was, this is what I wanted to do. Or somebody that frustrated me that even in comment section, I'll read comments sometimes. I'm like, oh, and I'll have an imaginary fight with that person, but I won't comment on it.
Right. Yes. The comment section is a dicey place. Like you can really, it's like a vortex. You can get sucked into that type of arguing, and it doesn't do for me what I want it to do for me.
Exactly. And then it can be misconstrued and things like that. And so I personally let the comments, and this is going to be a bad practice and people are going to see behind the curtain on my TikTok. I most of the time let the comment section sort itself out. Because somebody else is going to be watching the comments and then they're going to get in that fight. And then if I notice, oh, you're being an outright dick. Okay. I'll either block the person and delete the comment, or I'll make a statement to you're being outright unfactual. You're being outright disinformational. But most of the time I'm like, oh, you're getting owned. Oh, and you know it. Oh, okay.
It is amazing when somebody comes full circle in a comment section. You're like, wow, sometimes people do get the point in those forums. Always.
And I'm lucky most of my followers tend to not argue. And I've seen several fights where they're like fighting. And then there'll be that moment where you see both of them like, wait. I was wrong. Yeah, you were wrong. Oh my God. And I've seen
precious moments.
And I'm like, I love my followers so much because they will most of the time try to be like, oh shit, I was wrong. Okay, it may have been a lot of time fighting, but most of the time they'll be like, why are we fighting? We literally And anyway, we'll move right on to the next question. To Auntie Kinky asks, what was the biggest challenge you had when working towards your license, and what advice would you give to a person thinking of going into this career?
The biggest challenge I find is the licensing exam called the NCLEX, and it is a challenging test, and studying for the test is challenging. But I wish that I reminded myself that the majority of nurses who attempt this test do pass it, and if you don't pass it, you can try again. It is not a make it or break it thing. And I wish I didn't approach the licensing exam with so much scrutiny of myself and what I knew and what I didn't know, because it wasn't helpful. And years later, I learned it anyway. You're going to learn all this stuff in time. So I would say for writing the licensing exam, whether you pass it or not, it has nothing to do with how good of a nurse you're going to be. So if you don't pass it the first time around, you will eventually pass it. And it doesn't mean that you don't deserve to be a nurse. It doesn't have some of the most amazing, compassionate, knowledgeable nurses I know did not pass the licensing exam the first time around. So that would be the biggest takeaway.
Fantastic. And I can tell you, so if you're watching Want to Become a Nurse, remember that little piece of advice. It's very valid. And so going to go on to Lucas Gray. Well, this one doesn't apply, Lucas. That was more for my American followers, but I guess it could apply to Canada as well. If you've worked in multiple states, I think y'all have provinces, or no?
Yes. Yep. Provinces. Yep.
If you've worked in multiple provinces, what were the best provinces to work in? He's a traveling nurse, so he wanted to know. But I guess this could be informative to any traveling nurse in Canada if that's a common practice there.
Yeah. I haven't done any traveling, but British Columbia and Alberta have the Rocky Mountains. So I would imagine that, tourist-wise, things to do-wise, that's probably the most popular because it's the most geographically beautiful. I'm sure if you asked a lot of people, that's what they would say. But our East Coast, like Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, those are provinces in the East Coast, those places have their own unique culture, and they would be very interesting places to at least visit once if you were a travel nurse working in Canada. They're beautiful, people are beautiful, and they're different than the rest of Canada, unique.
I like that. And so I know most of Canada, like your much more northern areas, are much more less populated. Are there nursing opportunities up there? Because I know we have squads that are relatively empty here in the United States. But yeah.
Yes, so that northern nursing, you would be working in places that are incredibly remote. Some of those communities are fly-in only, from what I understand. You're working in mostly Indigenous or Inuit populations that have very complex and specific health needs. The nurses I know that have done it have loved it. It's very isolating work. You're flying to places that don't have a whole lot of things to do in terms of entertainment, but I think they'd be really amazing experiences because it's basically the Arctic, right? These are areas that are like the tundra. They're apparently parts of the year where it is dark a lot of the time, and there's parts where the sun is out at midnight. So there's tons of opportunity. These places need nurses. So I would encourage people to go because I know that the need exists, and I'm sure it would be a unique opportunity. I mean, I've heard stories where like people need to be flown out they're not hospitals. Like nurses work out of a portable and there's no real doctor. So it's your ability to call a doctor and they give these advance orders. It's very bare bones. So you would need experience, but there's an absolute need. I've always wanted to do it. It's something that I absolutely would consider doing. It would be just amazing to be able to go to these places that like a tiny fraction of the world will ever enter,
Yeah. And I always, it's one of those things I always glaze over, and I just remembered in this moment. I was like, oh yeah, Canada has that whole swath that is just remote.
Yeah.
populations. And like United States has a little bit of that, but not so much. I mean,
Right.
Texas, you don't want to go into for obvious reasons, but
Right. And they also have the northern lights in those areas. So I know nurses go up there and see the northern lights and say it's like this amazing experience. Although I've heard it's bad luck to film it. So every time I see a video of it, I'm like, is this bad luck? I'm like,
I didn't film it, so I didn't film it, so it's not bad luck for me.
It better not be.
Oh my gosh. And so moving on to the next question. Kimberly Lakin asks, what is your favorite brand of scrubs and ink pens? And we've already discussed compassion fatigue. So what are your favorite brand of scrubs and ink pens, I guess?
I gotta be honest, my favorite scrubs are the ones that come out of the machine at work. They're just
really
blue, honestly. Though lots of people love figs. Canada has a brand called Koa, Koa. They're really good, but they are expensive. And at the end of the day, I just love the drawstring classic scrub. Those are the ones that are the most comfortable. They feel like pajamas. They definitely, you look like a nurse. Everybody registers you as a nurse. So they are my favorite. And ink pens, I'm like a classic Bic cheap pen girl. I don't use the gel pens. I know a lot of nurses are big into their pens. I also like the clinical pen that clicks and has blue, black, red, and green ink. Those are my favorites.
I miss those. I remember those. I haven't.
Yeah. They're all over hospitals. They're everywhere. People love them.
I guess a fun addition to that the scrub question: if hospitals, for some random reason, went back to the classic 1940s, 1950s nurse outfit, how would you feel? And would you against absolute no?
I cannot picture myself nursing in like pantyhose. I can't think of anything more. So the old one was the white stockings. They're like white pantyhose. I just don't. What do you do when you need to pull them out? Like, it's so impractical. Bless the women that worked in that. Like, bless them.
Honestly, I thought about it the other day because I think I was watching Nurse Ratched, and and I was like, just how uncomfortable was that? You're dealing with people at their grossest moment, because people are gross in general. And then you're in this skin tight, cinched pantyhose, little pillbox hat. I'm like, you poor women. You poor women.
And it's white. And I can't think of a worse color to wear. Like, there's so much waste to potentially get on your scrubs. Like,
exactly. Even at the most just like basic. I just had that thought. I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure nurses would riot if you had to.
Yeah. I would refuse. I'd be like, no, you can't make me, and you can't convince me it's a good idea. So.
I'm glad to hear that. And so a tomboy jock goes into working pre, during, and post-pandemic. And what are the changes that you've seen in that duration regarding environment, things like that?
Seeing the breaking point of different colleagues was very, I think, brought along a certain intimacy to the job. Like, I mean, you already feel like family, but you saw a different side of coworkers, right? Like, well, that is their breaking point. That's them at their limit. I've never really seen that before. During the pandemic too, I just found that there were moments where the exhaustion on that kind of lived with everybody. That level of burnout was eerie to see en masse, where you're like, oh, we really are a group of traumatized people that have not had a chance to process any of this. So yeah, really strange times. And it, continues to be strange times, because it's not completely over, and also I don't think we've all seen the fallout. So
Yeah,
that's an evolving thing for sure.
I agree. And it's going to be really telling in the next 5, 10 years what the ramifications fully are going to be regarding
Hmm.
this whole.
Yeah, right? I think about that all the time.
Same here. I'm like, you know what? Even me as a person, I'm like, I still am uncomfortable in massive crowds. Um, Very much so. I've become much more, you know what? I'm happy at home. You know what? This is good, especially with everything
Yeah.
kind of going on. This is good. This is great. uh,
Yes.
so yeah, and we're gonna see the ramifications. And I'll be in my 40s by then. So
Me too. So it'll be, yeah, I'll be a little bit older and wiser. And but the other thing too is that it just made me very anti-fragile. I feel
mhm.
like I was a little bit more not sensitive, but easier to get a little bit broken. And that's, I guess, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing yet, but it's
Yeah,
definitely made me very anti-fragile.
yeah, and
Mhm.
that can be a double-edged sword, and time will tell.
Exactly.
We are
Exactly.
still,
We will see. Stay
we are
tuned.
we are still not far enough to figure out what this trauma is going to do. So, yeah, stay tuned.
Yes.
And so we have two final questions, one from a patron and then one from me. If the one for the patron comes from Macy Budke, asks, as someone going into healthcare administration, what is something management needs to do or understand to support their nurses, especially now post-pandemic?
We need to listen to them and consult with them. That's a ongoing theme in healthcare, is that a lot of the biggest decisions that are made are not made by, sorry, my cat is
Oh, the
decided she wants to
boy.
enter. um, is that they just don't, the decisions are made by administrative staff without consulting the boots that are on the ground. And it not only, it makes staff feel like, the nursing staff feel like they're not being listened to, but sometimes the ideas worked in theory and they will not work in reality. They won't work practically. So I
Mm.
think for both sides, it's easier if decisions made in healthcare are collaborative with the people who are delivering the care.
Honestly, and I think that our previous guest said the exact same thing. So I see it's something that does need to be very much addressed. And actually, I
Yes.
see that a lot especially in education, in all things where there is the skilled practitioners and then the administrators who are just the bureaucracy behind the more hands-on staff, like the teachers, the nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And the administrative staff doesn't quite listen to the actual struggles of the people that are doing the service of the organization. If I'm making sense at all, and I see that
Yes.
best.
Yes, and I know they like have a customer base, customer service based model to how they want to approach healthcare. But if that's the case, and you also have resources tied up in it, it's still a good idea to consult the people who are delivering the customer service.
Hi, baby.
She
Never
cannot be
apologize.
tamed.
Never apologize for a cat get on screen. Never
Yeah.
apologize for a beautiful baby. She still looks like a
Yeah.
teenager. Looks like.
Yeah, she is. She's just she's 3 months old now.
Oh, my old lady's
Yes.
asleep in her perch in the living room as she always is. So she's already like, "Here, come pick me up and we'll go lay down on the couch." Look at
I
that
love
blood.
them.
I love cats.
Yeah, me too. They're the best.
They
Don't know
really
what
are.
I'd do without them. That's actually my biggest coping skill, is the cats.
Same. I'm actually looking to start road tripping with my cat because I want to go to Zion National Park. I'm like, okay, you're
Oh,
11. You ride pretty well, so I want to buy her a bigger carrier to keep in the car. One of the ones that's like the hotel style with like the litter box and everything. See, let's see how
yeah.
and let's see do the
Yeah.
ride together because
Oh,
biggest
that'd
issue.
be fun.
So
That's
we'll
so
see.
nice.
I'm gonna try
Yeah.
it. I'm gonna try it. So let's move on to the final fun question.
Okay.
So, as a nurse, say you are working and the zombie apocalypse happened right then and there on your shift. What would you
Okay.
do? Would you dip or would you continue working until you couldn't?
I I'd continue working. There is that element of liking the chaos. I'd be like, what can I do with my skills here? Can I help? What can I do? How's this going to pan out? Because if the apocalypse is already here, I'm going to be diving in.
Yeah.
I won't be the one who's spawning personally. Not me.
That is a beautiful answer. And on that note, I want to thank you so much for joining for Talking Tea with Auntie. It really is. I'm honored you offered to join.
No, the honor and pleasure is all mine. I'm so thankful. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for having me.
Of course, it was a pleasure. And when I saw your message, it's like, I absolutely have to get a Canadian nurse. Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for having me. I love it.
You're so welcome, and thank you. Any final words you want to tell to the universe out there? And a last message you want to say before we cut off?
Just take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Consider each other, That's all.
And that is one of the things I always say too. And on that note, thank you, my love. And you take care of yourself and get to paying attention to that cat. She clearly wants
I will. She clearly she does. Yes. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, my love. You take care, darling.
You too. Bye-bye.
Well, that was a wonderful interview with Katie, and I hope y'all enjoyed this episode of Talking Tea with Auntie. And as another reminder, this is available in podcast. If you are listening to this version, I have edited the audio for y'all to make this all much more seamless. And if you are watching here on YouTube, my loves, feel free to go to the podcast version. It's available, I think, on Spotify and Apple Music or whatever it is, Apple Podcasts. And as always, feel free to find me on all the socials, honey. I'm so grateful y'all are here. And please comment in the comment section what next topic you would love for me to address and talk about. And that whole advice column may be a new podcast I make. As always, babies, I love you. Y'all take care. And remember, drink your water. I love you.